Yesterday, a Ram Dass quote popped up for me that I felt was really fitting, and I'd like to share that before we begin. When we touch that space of oneness behind our separateness, all the negative states like fear and depression and addiction naturally fall away because the quality of love has no time, no space, was never born, and will never die. I grew up right here in Kingston, and I am part of a big, loud Italian family, which some of who are here. And my brother Jim has the house where we all gather. It's really big, there's a pool, it's lovely. And I live about 15 minutes away. And then those early days, after my husband had passed and everything was so jumbled, one day I was going over to the house and I couldn't remember how to get there. I kept taking the wrong turn. I had to use the GPS to go somewhere I had been 1,000 times. And that is just the awful reality of brain fog. You just have broken synapses. My fellow perimenopausal women, how many nouns have evaporated just when you needed them? Right. So in those early days of my grief, I was scrolling as one does, and there were some yoga videos that came in, and they were talking about the benefits of getting upside down, because when you invert, you increase your oxygen to your brain and your lungs and your heart. And I wondered if it could help my brain fog. I was desperate for anything that would help because I knew I wasn't stupid, but Lord, I felt it. And I consider myself to be a yoga-ish person, but a headstand was definitely beyond my skill set, but I set the goal because I knew in my heart I really wanted to try it. So after lots of crunches and push-ups and building up the right muscles and help from my yoga teacher, I did it. I did a headstand, and the effects were immediate. I would get upside down for about 30 seconds, and then for the next hour or so, I would feel like my head was on straight. My fog wasn't vanished, but I could think more clearly, and I felt way less foggy and confused. So my headstand became a daily practice. First 30 seconds, then a minute and a half, and I always felt clearer afterwards. I felt like I was rejuvenating my brain. It didn't solve everything, but it gave me hope that I would get past the fog. What was actually happening in those morning headstands was a mindfulness practice. It was a major slowdown and an intentional doing. The clinical research on the benefits of inverting and mental clarity are really mixed and few. But did that matter? I could feel the difference. Oftentimes we trust what's measurable, what's proven, completely ignoring what we're feeling because we live in a culture that overvalues the mind over the heart. We're taught to direct our lives with the mind. We focus on achievements, productivity, things that are measurable, tangible. Use your head. We forget that knowing also comes from in here. So doing a headstand isn't something that you might think of as a spiritual practice, but listening to that inner knowing, that conscious wisdom that we all carry, is a spiritual practice. And inner knowing was present in my curiosity to try that headstand. Inner knowing sometimes gets dismissed like that's not real. But following your instinct, following your gut, very real. Like a mother who knows that something is off with her child, but there's no tests or doctors that will listen. That mother knows. The heart points us to what is true. This is something we all know, but we often forget. The universe sends us gentle messages like dreams and synchronicities. It was like a day or two after my husband had passed. I was at my house and I was sitting on my deck with my dear friend Jessica, and it was late. It was maybe 10 o'clock at night. And we were sitting on the deck, and a little baby sparrow landed at our feet. It was maybe a foot between us. We looked at each other like, what is happening right now? Because it was dark, it was late. I shifted in my chair and it didn't move. It stayed there for a solid 5 minutes. And then I shifted because it wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a message. It was like it wanted to be there with us. It was strange, but also made sense. The knowing of the heart is real. Listening to your heart is a spiritual practice. Some may call it prayer. Some find it in meditation. However you tap in, we are all born with a spiritual core. And there is now science that substantiates that we are all innately spiritual beings, with or without the embrace of religion. And when this spiritual core is nourished, we're less likely to become addicted, less likely to suicide. We're able to be whole and thrive. Dr. Lisa Miller is the author of the book, The Awakened Brain, which is about the neuroscience of spirituality, which absolutely feels like an oxymoron. But we have in our brain a series of circuits that allow us to see the deep nature of life, that there is a transcendent relationship, that we have a capacity to feel the deep connection in and through all living things. Dr. Miller is explicit that religion and spirituality are not the same thing. Spirituality is the seat of transcendent awareness. Spirituality exists independent of religion. One can be religious, but not spiritual. Some people find God in the rules and in the structure. Some people find God in nature or community or even art. Dr. Miller's research shows that no matter your religion, no matter your beliefs, humans are capable of a transcendent relationship with life. Maybe you find it sitting on your deck, holding space with a little bird that just wants to be near you. However it lands, we are wired for this, and ritual is how we remember. So ritual and habit are often used interchangeably, but there is a very meaningful difference between the two. A habit is something we do automatically, often without much thought. I wake up, I get a glass of water, I open my curtains, I put on my socks. Whereas a ritual carries intention. It is something we set out to do. It creates a small moment of pause where the mind and the body are given permission to slow down. This is why rituals feel so grounding. They're not just tasks to complete, but are experiences that the nervous system learns to trust. Rituals bring comfort. Where's my basketball people? LeBron James, he throws a piece of chalk up in the air before every single game. Serena Williams, she wears the same pair of socks throughout the entire tournament, doesn't wash them. She also bounces the ball 5 times before she takes her first serve, every time. These are the rituals that calm us. They make us feel safe. They're expected, they're familiar. And whether it's superstitious or not, all rituals are made up. They only have meaning because we make it so. But there is actually some science happening. Rituals engage our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that organizes. It's the control center. It's in charge of executive functioning and regulating stress. And when we engage that front part of our brain, we're able to turn down the heightened activity of the amygdala to help us remain calmer. The amygdala is where we process emotions. So the familiar patterns of a ritual create a container for our emotions to help us process them. We're able to zoom out to get perspective and focus on something other than anxiety or grief. My father passed away last June, and he was a Catholic. And I've been a Unitarian Universalist for 10 years now, and even though I have no plans to return to Catholicism, going to Mass was such a comfort. I knew the steps, I knew the prayers, and those rituals were such a familiar support. So whether you're an athlete throwing chalk in the air before a game or burning some sage around your house at the full moon to release what no longer serves you, yes, rituals are real. They create comfort, safety, and you are also engaging the awakened brain. So how was all this discovered? Well, Dr. Miller's study was based on people recounting a spiritual experience while their brains were being scanned in an fMRI machine. And as they spoke about those moments, what lit up in the brain was what researchers call a bonding network, the same network that we use for connection, for meaning, and for relationship. In other words, when people described feeling connected to something greater than themselves, their brains were responding as if they were in relationship. And this showed up across the board, whether someone was praying, meditating, talking about community, or simply describing a moment that felt deeply meaningful. The brain doesn't distinguish between spiritual and relational, it just knows connection. What's even more fascinating is that the awakened brain acts as a buffer against despair, providing protection against depression. Those subjects who had a really strong spiritual core, who identify themselves as spiritual people, had a thicker cerebral cortex. And cortical thickness is associated with an 80% reduction in the risk of depression and addiction. Why is that? Because spirituality gives us a lens to look at life in a more expansive and illuminated way. In simpler terms, hope. This feeling of connection builds resilience through our suffering. We don't control the skies, we navigate them. That's the transcendent relationship in times of need. Higher power, where are you? Guide me, help me. Just when I've lost all hope, there's a little sparrow sitting with me. So who would like to try on the awakened brain? In our last few minutes here, I'd like to walk us through a brief ritual that demonstrates this capacity, a spiritual landing, if you will. So I invite you to clear out your space within your body with 5 breaths. Okay? And I invite you to close your eyes, and I'd like you to visualize a table. This is your table. And you may invite 4 people, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind to come join you at your table. And with you sitting there, go around your table and ask each one if they love you. And now you may invite your higher self, your true higher self, the part of you that is everything that ever was and is, the part of you that is much more than everything you've ever done or not done, your true higher self. And ask you if you love you. And finally, you may invite your higher power and ask your higher power if they love you. And with all those people sitting there at the table with you, ask them, what do you need to know right now? And when you're ready, I'll invite you back to the room. You can open your eyes. That is your counsel. They are always there for you. The people may change. You might ask them different questions. Your higher self and your higher power and those who truly have your best interest in mind. This is deep awakened awareness. A deep, loving consciousness that flows in and through and between us. We are building to see and know this level of loving relationship. Loved, guided, never alone. I still do my headstand every morning. 3 minutes, that's the max, just long enough to shift my perspective. It doesn't fix everything, but it brings me back to my body, to my breath, to the quiet inner knowing that I have learned to trust. And in those moments, I remember that I am connected, that I am held, and that I am not alone. As Unitarian Universalists, we come to this faith from so many different paths. Our religion is the embrace of the interconnected web of life and the respect and worth and dignity of all. The lighting of our chalice, that's our ritual of hope. And as you leave here to head out into your week, where does ritual show up in your life? Is there a moment where you slow down and give some intention to your day? Because we are wired for this, and ritual is how we remember.